Okay, well, this is the Daly House Museum. It was built in 1882 for Thomas Mayne Daly, who was elected mayor in the same year. He was a lawyer in the city, and he conducted a lot of his lawyer business out of the house here, as well as living in it. He left in 1886 and was replaced by George Caldwell and his family, who purchased the house. They had 7 kids, so they added the 3rd floor for some extra space and made some other additions. In the 1930s, the city purchased the house again and turned it into the Maples Children's Shelter, which was here until 1976, when Brandon Museum Inc., under Stephen Magnacca, one of Brandon's other ex-mayors, bought the house and turned it into the Daly House Museum. So we've been here since then, which makes us the longest tenants of the house, if you will. So this is our parlor. Over here we have our music cabinet. So this is where you would keep your sheet music. For playing the pump organ, which was a staple of many households like this in the era. Over here we have a camera that came out of a photo studio downtown. If you'll notice the cape on the back of these cameras, it was mainly used for 2 reasons: to keep the film cartridge inside from light exposure, but also to protect the photographer, because the flashes at the time were essentially just gunpowder in a reservoir, so you could burn yourself pretty badly if you weren't careful. Over here we have a blue wedding dress from the early 1900s. Wedding dresses didn't always used to be white. Queen Victoria was one of the first to do that and kind of started the trend. Over here, these are a couple of party dresses that we have. And right next to the lady's secretary, which is where the lady of the house would do her correspondence from. Over here, this is one of our phonographs. It's still in working condition. These are the cases where you would actually buy needles for it. Needles would break quite often because, unlike modern vinyl records, these are made of wax, so they're a lot heavier, a lot thicker, and wear out needles a lot faster. Over here, this is some bone china that we've collected. Bone china is very fine. If you held it up to the light, you could actually see clear through it. And over here, this is a children's art desk. So this is where children would practice drawing and writing. You could change the roller here to have different designs, so you would have letters or pictures. And then over here we have another phonograph right next to a family Bible from a family in Manitoba from the early 1900s as well. You can see how thick it was. Family Bibles were also kind of doubled as family history books. And up here is actually a photo of Mr. and Mrs. Daly at a ceremony for his political career later in life. Most people think it's actually a wedding photo from the dress that Mrs. Daly chose to wear for it. And then behind here, behind the door, we have what's called a sword chair. A sword chair was a chair that was missing an arm, so that a gentleman wearing a sword for customary reasons or military reasons could be able to sit in it and not get his sword stuck in the arm of the chair, causing embarrassment. So now we'll move on to the kitchen. So in the hallway here, we have another photograph of Thomas Daly on the wall here, as well as a clock from 1901. It was originally painted green, since been changed. This is a photograph of the Caldwells, who were the second owners of the house. And over here, this is a plaque dedicated to Stephen Magnacca, who was the founder of the museum, along with some numerous other individuals. Ex-Mayor Brandon, who was very passionate about history. Our kitchen here features a 124-piece silverware set, which would have been a very common sort of set for a house like this. On the table, you can see we have a pair of knife and fork with antler handles that would have been used for serving fish, resting on crystal knife rests. Back there, that's an oak sideboard from the 1880s, and sitting on the bottom right corner of it is a sugar bowl that was actually salvaged from the wreck of the SS Alpha, which was a steamship on the Assiniboine River. Back in the case here, we have a collection of various other kitchen items. This is a sugar bowl with a spoon for every guest, something that would be kind of handy to have in times that we're living in now. In the middle, that's a cranberry glass butter dish. Cranberry glass is made by blowing gold flakes into the glass as it's being created, which gives it that red hue when the light refracts. In the bottom corner here, we have Nippon china from Japan, as well as a mustache cup sitting beside it. So the mustache cup has a lip at the bottom to prevent a gentleman's mustache from getting wet with tea while he's partaking in his drink. Up here on the wall, these are a collection of royal family commemorative plates ranging from Queen Victoria all the way up to Queen Elizabeth, the current queen. And also on the wall here, this is one of our oldest items in the museum. This is a sampler from 1811. It was done by a 12-year-old girl. Samplers were sort of a way for girls to show how much progress they'd made with their stitching. And so yeah, being from 1811, it's one of our oldest items. Behind the door here, this is another sideboard that we have. This one came from Ontario. It's a little bit newer than that one, but I like it a lot more. It's made of walnut, and the carving is a lot more intricate, such as the woman's face at the top. Sitting on it, this is a coffee urn and tea set that came from Winnipeg in the early 1900s. And then moving through here, this is our exhibit of Mutter Brothers General Store. So they opened the Clement Block in 1903, and they were in business till 1975. This is some of the original shelving units that they had in the store. This is their meat grinder that they used to have. It still would work if it was sharpened. Up on the walls, we have a lot of merchandise that you would have found in a store such as this, and some advertising boards such as McDonald's cigarettes and Coca-Cola. Over here, this is some more items that would have been fairly common, again, such as Coca-Cola. Potato chip tins. Everything back then used to come in either glass or tins, and most items you could even get refilled at the store, such as honey and milk. This is an interesting item here, this tin of potato chips. They're from Detroit, Michigan. They're scientifically processed potato chips. The alkaline levels that they put in them, they claimed made them easier to digest and therefore better for your health. Back here we have the Mutter's original till alongside some of their cheese barrels. They were very well known for their imported cheeses from Ontario that they would age in barrels such as this in their basement, and they were renowned all over the province, and even in the United States they would ship their cheeses. This is one of their cheese cutting blocks that they would have used for said purpose. Up on this wall we have some examples of old medicine and pharmaceutical items. A lot of them are very interesting to look at the ingredients for, such as the cough syrup that used to contain chloroform, for example, and many medical items from the time actually included mercury as a cure, and the topical application of them would have resulted in many cases of mercury poisoning. Around the corner on the wall here we have Mr. Mutter's till gun. So this would have been used essentially to stop robberies. There's an anecdote from the person who donated it about Mr. Mutter chasing somebody down Rosser Avenue with it after they stole some money from the till. And to the right here is the scale that they would have used, still in working condition. So this room we have set up as a kitchen of the time might have been. This is what's called a hosier over here, and so it would have been kind of your one-stop baking and cooking stop. This apparatus here would have been filled with flour, and it would sift out the bottom as you turn this lever. This over here would be where you keep your sugar, and it would come with cabinets for your rolling pins, etc. This is our Monarch stove. It's all cast iron. It was a very multifunctional unit stoves back then. It was used to heat your home, do your cooking, heat your bath water. This is a water reservoir here. So this is where you would fill with water, and then the flames would heat it for baths and for dishes and things like that. Over here on the wall we have a photo of Manitoba's first hydroelectric dam, which was built just north of the city of Brandon, as well as a foot-operated sewing machine unit. Over here, this is an ice box. So they used to harvest ice from the river during the winter, and they would bring it by, deliver it, and shove one block up top, and you would keep your food and other items underneath, and there would be a dish at the bottom to collect the evaporating water. So down here features a collection of items from all across Manitoba, ranging from Mackenzie Seeds equipment to medical equipment from the area. Over here we have a sign from Fleming's Drugstore, which was the first one in the city. It was built in 1881. This is a box of foundry tools, so these would have been used to actually make the letters on signs such as this. We actually also feature a Toronto Maple Leafs jersey in the case here that belonged to Turk Broda. He played for the Leafs in the 40s and won a couple Stanley Cups with them. Very renowned goalkeeper in hockey. Moving around the corner, we have some other photographs of some Brandon's hockey teams. These are some of Brandon's ladies' hockey teams. It's interesting to note the uniforms they wore weren't very practical, as they essentially played hockey in dresses very often. And around the corner again, more of our hockey teams. Canadian Pacific Railways Hockey Club. Organizations such as the railway used to have sports teams for their workers to partake in to alleviate boredom and create a sense of togetherness on the long trips away from home. This is the Brandon Elks, who are actually the precursor to the Wheat Kings. And on this wall we have some photos of the original Brandon Curling Club in the Wheat City Arena. Here we have Jimmy Creighton and the president of the curling club. Jimmy Creighton was a mayor of the city. In this hallway we have some then and now photos of the city. This is some horse and automobiles on Rosser Avenue, so you can see how much of it has changed. Not many of the original buildings remain, especially the Imperial Hotel. Over here, this is a photograph of Barnum and Bailey's circus that actually came through Brandon in 1909, and we have it next to the Travelers' Day Parade. And over here, this is from the Brandon Summer Fair circa 1909. It features a high diving act, and then a high diving act that came through again in 2017. This is the First Nations display at the Brandon Summer Fair from back in 1905, as well as the Dakota Nation Winterfest. And this is another photo of the fair showing kind of the main drag. It's interesting to see some of the booths and exhibits. Back then you had your classic palm readers and knife throwing acts and things like that. And so then around the corner here we have our exhibit of J. Birtle's Butcher Shop. Birtle's operated a butcher shop on Rosser Avenue till the 60s, I believe. This is some of their original equipment, such as the meat grinder and their scale here. These are a pair of ice tongs. So when cutting ice out of the river, this was the apparatus they would use to grab the blocks and drag them to the cart. This is another one of my favorite items. This is a bottle of liquid smoke. So you would rub your meat with this to give it a smoky flavor, but upon inspection of the ingredients, I wouldn't recommend that for modern consumption. Back in here we have their freezer door from Birtle's Butcher Shop. You can see how thick it is, because back then it was just ice blocks keeping the meat cold, so you would need a big thick door to keep that. As well as a delivery bike from West End Groceries that operated on Rosser Avenue as well. So we'll move back down the hallway. These are adding machines that would have come from their accounting department. So this is essentially what your calculator would have looked like as an accountant at Mackenzie Seeds. And this was a typewriter that they had for in more industrial use, thicker paper. Over here, these are dictaphones. So the gramophone was invented by Thomas Edison, but actually Alexander Graham Bell invented the dictaphone to record personal messages on. They used cylindrical records. And so the Edison company actually invented a thing called the dictaphone shaver, which would actually allow you to shave the grooves off of the wax cylinder and re-record a new message onto it. These are addressagraphs from Mackenzie Seeds. So an addressograph would allow you to type out plates like this that were almost sort of small versions of license plates that would have customers' contact information on them, and you could keep them in filing cabinets to pull out later, and that way you wouldn't have to continuously write names on envelopes or seed packages. You could simply stamp it with the appropriate plate. These are some trophies from the Brandon Winter Fair and Manitoba exhibition from over the years for various events. This is some of our sewing machine collection over here, as well as some of our hockey skates. So this is kind of the original hockey skate design, where you would strap them to the bottom of your shoes. And in fact, the guy who invented the original hockey skate was George Tackaberry, and he was from Brandon. He originally made them out of kangaroo hide. Over here is our telephone exchange. This came out of Carberry and was operational till 1977, actually making it one of the last telephone exchanges in operation in the province. So the way it would work was you'd phone up the operator, and they would have a look down here at the numbers, and they would connect you via the plugs. Over here we have a nurse's uniform from World War I, as well as our license plate collection on the back wall. Our license plates range from 1911 all the way into the 70s. It's interesting to see how they've changed and how Manitoba's slogans have changed. This particular one right here, this is made of paper and wood, because at that time the province's license plates would be issued as paper slips, and it was up to you to get them onto your car somehow. So many people would attach them via wood and cover them with plastic. This is some of our dentistry equipment that came from Dr. Dixon, who was a local dentist. This is the apparatus that's very different now with the hoses and the tools and the lights. This is one of the original chairs. Noticing the head brace here. Anesthetics weren't very widely used at the time, so it was more of a force of will getting your teeth pulled. Some of his items are pretty gruesome to look at right now, such as the Richardson retractor, as well as the tonsil snare down here, which essentially would be put down your throat, grab your tonsils with the tightener and just pulled out. And again, anesthetics were very hard to come by. Over here we have some military items. These are what's called dead man's pennies. So in World War I, when your loved one was killed, you would receive these. They're made of copper, and thus the name dead man's pennies due to their size and relation to the coin. These are some medals up here. The one in the middle is actually a German Iron Cross. And in the box here, in the trunk, we have some Queen Mary gift boxes, which were sent, Princess Mary gift boxes rather, that were sent to the front lines as sort of a relief package for the troops. Over here, some more medical equipment. This is a device that was used to treat skin diseases and skin disorders via ultraviolet light. Wouldn't have been very healthy, as the main reservoir here actually contains mercury again, which was a very common medical used product at the time. This is one of the first heart monitors here. So essentially there'd be a couple of electrodes hooked up to you, and it would read out on paper, and so a nurse would have to continuously keep reading it out. This little device here, this is a home arthritis remedy, which essentially boils down to a couple of electrodes you hooked up to yourself, and then this dial would allow you to change the electrical charge that was administered to you. And this down here, where this machine was used for electroshock therapy and things like that. So it would have been used at the Brandon Asylum up on the North Hill, where the ACC campus is now. Over here we have a coat made from beaver and mink fur. Sometimes they would make coats out of the fur of multiple animals to reduce the price. As well as a collection of plaques and photographs of various Brandon organizations, such as the Canadian Order of Foresters. This is an old curling trophy over here. This wheelchair at the time would have been used as an in-hospital wheelchair, as the wheels aren't large enough to push yourself on, so you would have needed to be pushed around in it. Also doesn't look like a very comfortable ride. And finally down here we have a ringer. So this is your classic. This isn't the home version, however, this is more of the industrial size, so this would have been used in tailors' shops for getting the wrinkles out of products. So we'll head upstairs now and move to our second floor. The photographs on the wall all pertain to James Duncan McGregor. He was a founder of the Winter Fair and Provincial Exhibition, and he was rather renowned for his cattle. He actually served in the provincial government for a time, and his daughter was actually awarded a King George Jubilee Medal. So in the master bedroom, one of the first things I always point out to people is that it's the only room in the house with a closet, because back then, closets actually counted as a room, and so you'd be taxed based on the amount of rooms you had. So many didn't bother building closets, or if they did, often the door was removed and replaced with a curtain, because now it's no longer a room. On the bed here, we have a wedding dress that was worn by Mrs. McNay, grandmother of the late Helen Christie of the Christie family, who started the school supply and office depot that's still in operation today. It was one of the city's first businesses. Over here, this is another wedding dress that we have, and this one's actually a tea dress. So back then, this is what ladies would wear calling on each other for tea. You actually had to schedule your teas. It was very rude to show up unannounced, and in fact, City Hall at one point had a tea registry where you would actually go and put down what your best times for tea were. Over here, this is your wash stand that you would have had in your room, containing all of the jugs, as well as your chamber pot, which was your bathroom at the time, which would be taken out discreetly by maids in the middle of the night. And over here, this is the men's dresser. It also features our pipe collection. We have quite the extensive collection of men's pipes, some of them very artistic and intricately carved. And on the ladies' dresser, we have a collection of mirrors and brushes, as well as a collection of hair straighteners and curlers. These kinds of curlers would actually be used. The arms would come down like this, and you'd actually place them in a candle holder to heat up. In the cupboard here, we have actually a collection of old spectacles, and this is what's called a nursing chair. So it's low to the ground so that the lady who's nursing her baby would be able to get them in and out of the crib without waking them. And on the chair is actually a quilt made of men's ties that came from Nova Scotia. On the steamer trunk here, we have a whalebone corset. So everybody knows the corset. Ladies would use it to keep their unrealistic figures. Very tight. A lot of women would pass out, and they would actually pass around a sort of smelling salt at parties to ensure that they weren't passing out during tea, because that would be an embarrassment. As well as a collection here of ladies' spats and shoe covers. Over on that wall, we have a mirror and candelabra, as well as our collection of pocket watches over there as well. When the house was originally constructed, it didn't have a bathroom, and it has actually moved around a couple of times. So this is where we have ours now. Originally, this would have been more of a getting ready room, a powder room, as it was connected to the main bedroom. But now we have it set up similar to how a bathroom in the Victorian era would have been. It's actually still fully operational. And we also have some items from local barber shops. There's an old sign with some prices up there. You'll notice that a tooth could be pulled at the barber shop, as well as it was the only place in town to get a hot bath. So this is where we have our traveling exhibits, as well as the exhibits that we ourselves create. Our current exhibit here is on Brandon House, which was a fur trading site run by the Hudson Bay Company, and is actually where Brandon got its name from. So coming around the hall, all the photographs on the wall are actually paintings that were done by a man named Peter Rindesbacher. He was a Swiss painter that came over and traveled with the fur traders in the area, and he painted what he saw, which was a very excellent documentation of life in the time in the area. So this is our panel on the early merchant towns. So essentially at the river, there was about 7 trade posts at one point or another, and so it was what was called merchant towns. So they had to they didn't get along with one another, but they had to survive, and their interactions basically were not unlike a community of trade posts. Life at Brandon House was very difficult. It was very hard living, very hard work. Men weren't paid particularly well by the Hudson's Bay Company. They were all tough guys who came over here as they had no work for them back in Scotland. Most of the Hudson Bay Company's men actually came from the Orkney Islands in Scotland, and they were known as Orkney men in North America. This map was actually done by Mad Donald Mackay, who was a fur trader who led the expedition out here to found Brandon House as a way of getting into the pemmican trade in order to supply traders back near James Bay and Hudson's Bay as they traveled up north. Over here, these panels explain and document the relationships they had with Indigenous people at the time, who were very integral to the economy and survival of the fur trading operations. This is our panel on Brandon House and the new Métis Nation. So the relationships formed at the time gave birth to many Métis names and families that still exist in Manitoba today, such as Mackay, Bon, Easter, Taylor, Richards, Fiddler. This is our panel on Brandon House and the Red River Settlement. So Brandon House actually predates any other settlements European in the area. The Red River Settlement was set up later, and the postmaster, Peter Fiddler, he aided the colony from the outset. But after the pemmican proclamation, when the export of pemmican from Assiniboia was outlawed, the Northwest Company, who had a different post, decided that they didn't like that and came after the pemmican that had been impounded at the colony, and it resulted in the Seven Oaks incident, which was a battle that resulted in the deaths of many fur traders. Over here we have the panel on Isabel Gunn, who is what we call the Brandon House Mystery. She was an Orkney girl who came over at a very young age pretending to be a man so that she could follow the fur trade and be employed. She went by various names, and there's actually very little documentation giving definitive evidence of where she was at any given time, but it's fairly substantiated that she did work at Brandon House as a fur trader and as a trapper for a while. Eventually she did come out as a girl after she gave birth to a child, and she couldn't hide it anymore, and then she was discharged by the Hudson's Bay Company for a lack of character, so to speak, which is their way of saying she had a child out of wedlock and therefore needed to go home. Over here, this is our panels on the buffalo hunt. So the decline in the buffalo hunt was essentially the death of the fur trade. There was no more source of pemmican to be had, so therefore it was very hard to continue operations, and in a way it was sort of the death of what you consider the Old West, so to speak. To the left here we have a coat rack that actually came out of Brandon City Hall. It features antler hangers here, as well as a spittoon. So back in the day that was still considered a thing, and I wouldn't have wanted that job emptying the spittoon. This hallway is actually where the original bathroom was. The floor is slanted for drainage purposes, and now we have it as our wedding dress gallery here. As well as on the wall we have some other clothing items such as a maid's smock and a lady's hat. This is some children's clothing items here, as well as a old copy of Alice in Wonderland that features cutout pictures. Further down the hall, we move to the children's room. And so in here, this is our children's room exhibit. Features some items such as the high chair here, as well as the brass bed that would have been very common at the time. The photographs on the wall up there are prints called Cupid Awake and Cupid Asleep that were taken in New York City in the 1900s, and they were very common prints in most houses. Over here we have some strollers from the time. This one came from Scotland in the 1860s, and if the provenance behind it is true, it becomes actually one of our oldest items in the museum. We have a collection of some children's toys, some cast iron trucks and trains, as well as a hand-carved rocking horse. And hanging up, we have a collection of christening gowns that children would have worn to church for events and things such as that. And this dress here is what was called a governess dress. It actually came from the United States. Our guest bedroom features our iconic dollhouse. So the dollhouse was made by a woman named Sigrid Green. She spent about 110 years building the dollhouse. It was continued after her death. She wired it for electricity herself and hand carved every item in the dollhouse right down to the most minute of details. Over here on the bed we have some more ladies' spats and purses and shoe stretchers, as well as a pair of shoes that were made for a woman who lost her toes in a fire. Over here on this mannequin we have a cape from Paris, France. These circle capes were actually invented because ladies' sleeves at the time were very thick, and therefore you couldn't get them down the arms of a coat, so the cape was preferred. Over here, this is a flapper dress, which was very common in the 1920s as your typical party dress, as well as a pregnancy dress over here. What women used to do is they would select a dress from their closet that they would cut down the sides, so that way it would be able to still fit them as their pregnancy went on. It's actually very rare to find them with the cuts still made, because women would just sew them up and continue wearing them after they gave birth. Back here on the dresser here we have a collection of perfume bottles, as well as a bottle of those smelling salts I was talking about before. So bottles such as this would get passed around at tea and at parties so that ladies essentially who couldn't breathe because of their corsets wouldn't pass out. These are some more hair crimpers and straighteners and curlers. This is a interesting one that actually plugs into a light socket, and the apparatus here would heat up and you could remove it. And then down here we have a typical steamer trunk. So families immigrating to Canada would often bring their entire lives in one of these trunks. They're made to be durable, and the ones with the curved lid are actually a little more rare. In that case there, we actually have some dolls that came from Scotland. The family who owns them won them in Scotland in the late 1800s, and the smaller dolls were added later by the family. And two paintings on the wall from a woman who, from the Brandon area. They're both of areas in Bosnia-Herzegovina. This one's of a bridge that was actually blown up during the Civil War by the Croats, and over there that's another bridge and mountain range. And this is the washstand for the guest bedroom, which had a cabinet for your chamber pot, and then the maid would come take that out, as I had previously stated, in the middle of the night, as it wasn't proper to see your bathroom being taken out for you. And that concludes our tour of the house today. I hope you had a good time.